death. That's going to happen. But the priesthood being taken away is not going to happen until yet in the future. And so he says, here's the sign. If a prophet says something's going to happen and it happens, he's a prophet, right? So that was a sign that this continuation consequences of his actions were going to occur. So it's told to Eli, but even when it's told to him, he didn't change anything, did he? So some time passes, and he still doesn't change anything. So now God speaks to Samuel, and Samuel, the next morning, Eli says, what did God tell you? And he says, don't hold anything back, tell me everything. And Samuel does, and Eli says, whatever God's going to do, he's going to do. So he just kind of has given up, right? Okay, so time is continuing to pass. We get into chapter 4 this morning and 5, and we're going to get back to the nation itself, and we're going to just kind of emphasize again in the text today the fact that everybody's still doing what's right in their own eyes. Now, it is interesting that Shiloh is still there, and that's where the tabernacle is, and that's where the ark is, and the altar is, and there were people still going there. That's how the whole account started in chapter 1, right, with Elkanah and his wife and his wives and his children going to the tabernacle in Shiloh. It's still there, and that comes into play right in the beginning of the text. So chapter 4, verse 1. And the word of Samuel came to all Israel. Now Israel went out to battle against the Philistines. See, they're still here. They're still a problem. Maybe they're trying to drive them out, but they haven't done it the way God wanted them to do it or when God wanted them to do it. You remember the account when all the way back at Kadesh Barnea, way back in the beginning, 2 years after they've left Egypt, and they send the spies in, and the spies come back and they say, we can't take it, and the people believe the spies, and then God says, okay, now you're going to die in the wilderness. Do you remember what Israel did next? Yeah, they said, oh no, we changed our mind. We'll go do it now. And God said, I'm not with you anymore, so this ain't going to happen, right? Okay, so they're going to go battle the Philistines here. Let's see how that comes back. They encamped beside Ebenezer, and the Philistines encamped in Aphek. And then the Philistines put themselves in battle array against Israel. So it sounds like Israel's the instigator here, right? Put themselves in battle array against Israel. And when they joined the battle, Israel was defeated by the Philistines, who killed about 4,000 men of the army in the field. And when the people had come into the camp, the elders of Israel said, why has the Lord defeated us today before the Philistines? Let us bring the ark of the covenant of the Lord from Shiloh to us, that when it comes among us, it may save us from the hand of our enemy. Well, I see a couple things there. One thing positive, one thing negative. The positive thing is they know why they lost. All right? They've had enough experience, and they know enough about their history to know, for example, Jericho falls because God's with them, right? Ai, a very small area that they send only a few soldiers to, defeats Israel. Why? God wasn't there. The only difference was God was there at one, God wasn't there at the other. They know that. And Israel learned that lesson that day, is because as you continue through the conquest of the land, that kind of thing doesn't happen again, does it? Now, they don't do what God tells them to do, but they don't lose like that again. And that's because God has been with them. But for all of these generations now, they have turned away from God and done what's right in their own eyes, and now they decide to go handle the Philistines by themselves, and they lose, and they think about it and say, well, God wasn't here. Okay, then the bad thing happens. How do you solve it? You go get your good luck charm. This connects, in my mind, to Sinai. When they're at Mount Sinai, and they're afraid of the mountain, it's quaking, and there's fire, and there's thunderings, and Moses is up there, right? And they haven't seen him in a while, and they're afraid, and so they erect that golden calf, and we look at that calf as an idol, and it is an idol, but that's not what their intentions were when they built it, or at least not the way it was proclaimed to them. When they built, what did he say to them? Here's your God who led you out of Egypt. They were trying to make some kind of a representation of God, yet God wasn't in that calf, was he? It was an idol. No matter what it represented, it was something other than God. So God wasn't there, and many people died that day. So here they get the ark now, and they get it because they think God didn't save us, so the ark will. It's our good luck charm. That was that calf. God's way up there on the mountain with Moses. Moses is not here. God's not here, so the calf will take care of us. And that's the ark. Now here's the thing. Was the ark where God met them? Yeah, it was. That's where the mercy seat was. That's where God met with the high priest. And when they traveled, remember back in the wanderings in the wilderness, isn't it when the cloud moved that they moved, right? But when it stopped, where did it stop? It was over the ark, because that's where God was. That was supposed to represent God. When they get to the river and they've got to cross the Jordan River and the priest's feet touch the water and it parts, and those priests walk right into the middle of that river with the ark, because that's where God was. And so now they've taken this blessing from God, this thing that represents where God is for them, and they make it their God. Okay, now go ahead. Yeah, they can't lose with the good luck charm there. Go ahead. You may be going where I'm going. Right. Right. And so they took that blessing and made it even more important than God. Okay, I've got a belief. I started to say a theory, but I don't think it's a theory. I think it's a belief. I have a belief that much of what goes wrong in our lives today and our relationship to God happens the very same way. When we take something good that God has given us and we make it more valuable than the God who gave it to us. You know, when we abuse the blessings and the opportunities and the stewardship that we have, we make a good thing a bad thing. Right? I mean, you think about even all the way back to the first sin in the Garden of Eden, and God had given them all of those good things, and there was that one there, all of those good things to bless them, healthy for them, tasteful for them, and yet they took that blessing of God giving them food and the ability to enjoy that and all of the food that He gave them, and they abused it and went beyond what God told them to do, and the abuse of that became sin. Intimacy in life. God gives us this blessing and a relationship to fulfill it in. When we go beyond that, we take the gift He has given it and we make it our guide, our God. We abuse it. It's the same thing with anything. You talk about eating. I can talk about it today because I'm done with my diet. You talk about eating. Is there anything sinful about eating? No. But when we abuse it, it becomes our God, doesn't it? Okay, that's the way this is. This blessing that God has given them, this physical representation where God meets with them, is not God. It's a blessing to connect them to God. What it becomes to them is their God. So they take this good luck charm and they're headed out into the battlefield, and that always goes well. Verse 4. So the people sent, did we read 3? Yeah. Okay. So the people sent to Shiloh that they might bring from there the ark of the covenant of the Lord of hosts, who dwells between the cherubim. See, that's where God was, on the mercy seat, right? Or at least where He met with them. And the 2 sons of Eli, so who's doing it? Hophni and Phinehas were there with the ark of the covenant of God. So they go, the priests go with him, right? What should they have done? Got to stop this, right? Okay, no, they go with him. And when the ark of the covenant of the Lord came into the camp, all Israel shouted so loudly that the earth shook. So they're all motivated. Now when the Philistines heard the noise of the shout, they said, "What does the sound of this great shout in the camp of the Hebrews mean?" And then they understood that the ark of the Lord had come into the camp. So the Philistines were afraid, for they said, "God has come into the camp." And they said, "Woe to us, for such a thing has never happened before. Woe to us, who will deliver us from the hand of these mighty gods? These are the gods who struck the Egyptians with all the plagues in the wilderness. Be strong and conduct yourselves like men, you Philistines, that you do not become servants of the Hebrews, as they have been to you. Conduct yourselves like men and fight." So the Philistines fought, and Israel was defeated, and every man fled to his tent. There was a very great slaughter, and there fell of Israel 30,000 foot soldiers. So let's start with Israel. The ark comes into the camp, and everybody celebrates. And are they celebrating that God's there? No, they're celebrating that the good luck charm, their God, showed up. And they brought him out there. They forced him out there. They put God where they wanted him to be, in essence. The Philistines hear about it, and what do they think? Why are they afraid? I think they have more confidence in God than Israel does. Israel's got more confidence in the ark. The Philistines say that ark represents something. That ark represents that God showed up. They don't know that Israel just went and got it. As far as they know, God told them, "Go get the ark and bring the ark with you." And what they know is they have heard about How many generations has it been? It's been a long time, hasn't it? So all they have is these accounts that have been passed down from their ancestors passed down the same accounts that Israel was supposed to be passing down. And it showed the very same thing. That's what Rahab said when the spies showed up, right? We heard what God did down in Egypt. We heard what he did over on the other side of the Jordan River. I think your God's a God I need to know. She became part of the lineage of the Messiah because of it. And that keeps getting passed down. And so now the Philistines hear this, and they think, well, now their God's coming to the camp. I don't know what we can do, but we're going to fight anyway. And they win. Why? The ark was there. But God wasn't there. Okay, so what's Israel going to think now? Well, let's keep going. Could have read verse 11 because it's a continuation of what we were going. That's true. That's true. Hold on, let me read one more verse before you say something, Yop. Oh, that's kind of like the gods that when Elijah was on the top of the mountain and they were out on a trip. Yeah. Also, the ark of God was captured, and the two sons of Eli, Hophni and Phinehas, died. Now, go ahead, Yop, before I talk about that. Yeah. For generations, Israel had no leadership. And this was the consequence. And the Philistines believe that that ark is God, right? And they capture that God. What do they now have to believe? See, here's the thing. Most of those, the peoples in that particular culture, in that particular day, they didn't fight army against army. They fought God against God. And so your army represented your God, and their army represented their God, and the God who was the stronger one would win the battle. That's the way it went. And so the Philistines have now defeated Israel's God and taken Israel's God because it's an idol just like the gods that they've developed themselves. At least all this is happening in their mind. And here's the thing. What they've taken is the ark. What they have not taken is God. And you know why, besides the obvious that they could not take God? The obvious is God wasn't there, was he? None of them did. Neither side. Israel did trust in the ark, but they didn't trust in God. If they had, God would have been there, and then they'd have won the battle in the first place. In fact, they might not have even been in the battle, because if they'd have trusted in God, the Philistines wouldn't have ever been here in the first place. Okay, so the ark's gone. The two priests are gone. Wasn't that a part of the statement that was made to Eli by that first prophet? Sons are going to die on the same day. Okay, keep reading. Verse 12. Then a man of Benjamin ran from the battle line the same day, came to Shiloh with his clothes torn and dirt on his head. What does that signify? He's mourning. Okay. Now when he came, there was Eli, sitting on a seat by the wayside watching, for his heart trembled for the ark of God. That literally means trembled with anxiety for the ark of God. And when the man came into the city and told it, all the city cried out. Now, before we talk about that, before we read further and finish this, I want to emphasize something here. Most parents are going to be afraid for their kids. They've gone into battle, right? Eli is afraid for the ark of God. Now, here's what that tells me. Though Eli never did what he was supposed to be doing as a leader, as a priest, as a parent, he still knew. He still knew what was significant here. I don't believe for a second that he wanted his sons to die in this battle. But what I do know is what he knew was God had to be first. Isn't there a principle that Jesus teaches us in the New Covenant on multiple occasions that whoever loves father and mother and son and daughter more than God doesn't really love God? And the same principle that's taught in Matthew 6:33 in the Sermon on the Mount when he says, "Seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness." If the kingdom's first, then what do you know is not first? Anything else, yeah. Anything and everything else, which includes your family, right? So I get it from Eli. I get it, understanding that what's most important is God and what it represents, and so he's concerned about that ark. I get his anxiety about all of that, but the question is, How can you know all of that and understand all of that and not put together the fact that your very actions have betrayed what you actually believe? And I'm going to make an application, then I'll move on. We tell our kids, we tell the next generation that God's first. What do we show them? We tell them, we need to be at worship. We tell them, you need to do the right thing. But do we have them there? Do we teach them at home? What happens in our home that they see that's different than what we say? Because every single one of us knows that no matter what you say, if your actions are different than what you say, people are going to believe what you're doing more than they're going to believe what you say. Okay? Eli had all of the right knowledge. He knew exactly what he was supposed to be doing. He knew what he ought to be concerned about. He just didn't have the actions to follow through with it. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. He had the authority to stop this from the time that you go all the way back to when his kids were starting the process of being the priesthood. From there on, he had numerous and every day probably opportunity to lead and do the right thing, including and up to the ark leaving and going out on the battlefield. Yep. Never stopped them. Okay, so keep going. So let's see. 14. Everybody's crying out. When Eli heard the noise of the outcry, he said, "What does the sound of this tumult mean?" And the man came hastily and told Eli. So he didn't come to Eli. He came to the city and told everybody what's happening. They're all crying out. Eli hears that. Now he wants a report, so the man's coming to him. Eli was 98 years old, and his eyes were so dim that he could not see. And then the man said to Eli, "I am he who came from the battle. I fled today from the battle line." And he said, "What happened, my son?" So the messenger answered and said, "Israel has fled before the Philistines, and there has been a great slaughter among the people. Also, your 2 sons, Hophni and Phinehas, are dead, and the ark of God has been captured." That's a lot. They fled. They were the cowards, and they ran, and a bunch of them died. Your sons, by the way, are 2 of the ones that have died. That's a lot. And the ark has been captured. Then it happened, verse 18, when he made mention of the ark of God, that Eli fell off the seat backward by the side of the gate, and his neck was broken, and he died. For the man was old and heavy, and he had judged Israel 40 years. 40 years, at least, that he had the opportunity to lead them and do the right thing, and the ability to do it, and he didn't do it. One of the things I tried to highlight as we went through the judges is to show that none of them were perfect. In fact, some of them were far from perfect. But what they had in common was they led. They led. And so in leading, they accomplished what God wanted them to accomplish. That's why some people don't actually consider Eli one of the judges. 2 reasons, really. One is because he's not actually in the book of Judges. He's in 1 Samuel. But the second one is he didn't actually do the job he was given to do. Okay. What caused this shock to cause him to die? The ark. He's shocked enough by his sons, but when he realizes the ark is gone, here's multiple things that have happened to him. First place, he's been told at least twice that the sign that he's going to lose the priesthood is that the 2 sons are going to die. That's happened. That's a shock here. He now had it confirmed. This is all going to happen. And the second thing, the ark of God, which was his responsibility to protect and lead the people to God, is gone. Now, here's a question. I talked about this a while ago. That mercy seat. The high priest was supposed to go in before the mercy seat alone once a year, right? And intercede for the people with God, right? How's he going to do that now? Well, I mean, he's dead, so not him. But how's anybody going to do that now? So, in essence, when they thought this ark represented God, what they've done now is they have caused themselves to lose God. He already wasn't going out to battle with them, but now they don't have a way to access him anymore. Did you have a comment? Okay, I thought I saw your hand. All right, let's keep going. Now his daughter-in-law, Phinehas' wife, was with child, due to be delivered, and when she heard the news that the ark of God was captured, and that her father-in-law and her husband were dead, she bowed herself and gave birth, for her labor pains came upon her. And about the time of her death, the women who stood by her said to her, "Do not fear, for you have borne a son." But she did not answer, nor did she regard it. And then she named the child Ichabod, saying, "The glory has departed from Israel, because the ark of God has been captured, and because of her father-in-law and her husband." And she said, "The glory has departed from Israel, for the ark of God has been captured." Now, I've always read that she goes into labor and she dies in giving birth, but that's not what happened in the account, actually. It does say, "For she died," but that's the end result. There's something that happens in between, and that's what we read about, and that is she is so much in sorrow, which is what's triggered her to go into labor at this particular moment. But she is so much in sorrow that she names her child. When they say you've given birth to a son, she doesn't even respond to that. But she does name the child. You've heard me talk about this. This is one of the things that I am intrigued by when I study through the Old Testament, especially the names and what they mean and how they connect with things. Like, this is the one I always use, but I love Isaac, because for his entire life, and certainly for the remainder of his parents' life, every time they called their son Isaac, they had to be reminded that God told them to name him that, because Isaac means laughter. So they're being reminded every time that they laughed at God when God promised them they would have a child. I love that. I love the fact that Abram was changed to Abraham, because before he ever had any children, God said to him, "You're going to be the father of many nations," and that's what your name means, Abraham. Right? Those names meant something. And Jacob, the deceitful one, and then his name changes to Israel. They have meaning. Moses is in the wilderness. His first child named means a wanderer in a strange land. Okay? Now grow up with the name Ichabod. And what does it mean? Where's the glory of God? God's glory has left us. This child is born into this world and carries its name its whole life. God left Israel. Where is God's glory? That'd be a tough one to name. There are names, maybe one of these days I'm going to have a lesson just on this. There are names nobody uses today. Nobody has ever named their daughter Jezebel. Nobody. You're not going to go to school and read through the list on the roster of students and read some kid named Judas, right? They might nickname them that, but they don't name them that, right? And there's a reason. This kid's name's Ichabod. Uh-oh, there's one I missed? Or you know somebody named Jezebel? Okay, nobody I know ever named a kid Jezebel. Yeah. I did have a niece. I won't. This is live stream, so I don't know who's watching this. So I got to be careful how I say some of this stuff. But I do have a niece that my sister used to babysit when she was a teenager, and she called her Lucy. That wasn't her name, but she called her Lucy because she thought that was short for Lucifer, and she thought that the little child was a little hard to keep up with. So I don't know whether anybody in my family even knows that, but it's true. So okay, I'm about out of time, and we got to cover chapter 5. So let's move on. Then the Philistines took the ark of God and brought it from Ebenezer to Ashdod. And when the Philistines took the ark of God, they brought it into the house of Dagon and set it by Dagon. Somebody tell me who Dagon is. God. That's their God, right? And why would they put the ark of God in the temple of Dagon? He won, didn't he? So this is the spoils of war that they take back to their God, from one God to the one who defeated him, so he gets it all. Okay, and when the people of Ashdod arose early in the morning, there was Dagon fallen on his face to the earth before the ark of the Lord. So they took Dagon and set it on its place again, and I laughed. I laughed. Not because, by the way, how did that, you already know this, we'll read it again in a minute, but why did that fall over? God did it. Okay, that's a simple answer. But God wasn't in the ark. Yeah. Yeah, God did this not because he was in the ark and they took him there. If he has that kind of power, they couldn't have taken him there without him allowing it to happen. But they took the ark, but God is everywhere, and so God is responding to the fact that they are honoring their idol with what was a holy thing supposed to represent him. So this God of theirs that they made, if he can beat God on the battlefield, why'd they have to stand him back up? Why couldn't he just stand himself back up? And why didn't they just ask him to do that? Because they know he's just an idol, don't they? Keep going. And when they rose early the next morning, there was Dagon falling on his face to the ground before the ark of the Lord. The head of Dagon and both the palms of its hands were broken off on the threshold. Only the torso of Dagon was left of it. So he's lost his head and his hands, which represent power, right? The hands represented power. So he's lost his head and his, well, actually it's just whatever it was made of, wood or gold or whatever it is. It's just an idol that's lost it, not their God, but it does represent that, doesn't it? So you start to think something's going on, right? Verse 5. Therefore, that's a connecting word or a conclusion word. Neither the priest of Dagon nor any who come into Dagon's house tread on the threshold of Dagon and Ashdod to this day. Think about that. What's a superstition? A superstition is some kind of a belief that doesn't have supporting evidence, not factual evidence. Like, for example, we recently had a Friday the 13th. Patrick hid all day long. Yep. Yeah. And you certainly don't want to be around a black cat on Friday the 13th, right? We've got a trip coming up shortly, and we're gonna go on a cruise shortly. And you know something? You may not know this. You know you can't stay on the 13th floor on a cruise ship. Yeah. If you do stay on it, something's gone wrong. We're afraid, superstitious, right? Somebody tell me why. I mean, I'm asking for facts. Well, that's what happens now. I'm asking, what's the evidence to say that it's a bad luck? What's the evidence that I base my superstition on? Yeah, it's some kind of fear somewhere, and somebody told me that something bad happened on a Friday the 13th on some many years ago, so it's got to be bad. And by the way, I stubbed my toe Friday, and it happened to be the 13th. So it must have been because it's superstition. They won't walk on the threshold where this idol fell down and lost his head and his hands. Rather than acknowledge the God who has done this, they won't walk on the ground where it went on because somehow that ground's become solemn, scary. I mean, the ground that has the ability to knock off the head and the hands of your God? Who wants to walk there? You might lose your head, right? You ever heard anybody say, you have, you've heard me say it. People will go around the world to believe a lie before they'll go across the street to believe the truth. That's this account. Keep going. Verse 6. But the hand of the Lord was heavy on the people of Ashdod, and he ravaged them and struck them with tumors, both Ashdod and its territory. So this is where this ark is. Not good enough to knock off the head and hands of the idol. Now everybody starts getting sick. And when the men of Ashdod saw how it was, they said, the ark of the God of Israel must not remain with us, for his hand is harsh toward us and Dagon our God. So this good luck charm is now a bad luck charm, so superstitious. We got to get rid of it. By the way, they have a little bit of fact in this one. I mean, if there's something that's changed, right? Okay, therefore, they sent and gathered to themselves all the lords of the Philistines, that's the 5 major cities and their leaders. What shall we do with the ark of the God of Israel? And they answered, let the ark of the God of Israel be carried away to Gath. So they carried the ark of the God of Israel away. I love that. Look, this is destroying our city. Our God has fallen down, its head's off, its hands off. Everybody's sick. We got to get rid of this. Who wants it? And somebody takes it. They bring in the 5 lords of the Philistines, and somebody takes it. I don't know what they're thinking, but okay, it's bad luck to us. We'll just send it to your house. And so one of the lords of the Philistines takes it. Okay, let's see how that went. Verse 9. So it was after they had carried it away that the hand of the Lord was against the city with a very great destruction. And he struck the men of the city, both small and great, and tumors broke out on them. Therefore they sent the ark of God to Ekron. So it was as the ark of God came to Ekron that the Ekronites cried out, saying, They have brought the ark of the God of Israel to us to kill us and our people. So they sent and gathered together all the lords of the Philistines and said, Send away the ark of the God of Israel and let it go back to its own place, so that it does not kill us and our people. For there was a deadly destruction throughout all the city. The hand of God was very heavy on them, and the men who did not die were stricken with the tumors, and the cry of the city went up to heaven. They just passing it around. And somebody finally says, hey, maybe we ought to get rid of this thing. I can picture a group of kids standing around in a circle playing hot potato. You ever played that when you were a kid? The object is, it can't stay in your hands, right? Is it any less hot when you throw it in somebody else's hands? I know it wasn't. I don't think anybody played with an actual hot potato. So we got this ark, and it's killing us. Gods are falling down. People are getting sick. Let's give it to our brother. So we give it to our brother. Same thing happens. I mean, their God didn't fall down because he's already at Ashdod, but same thing happens. Everybody gets sick. Let's send it to our brother. Before long, somebody finally said, hey, we don't want this. So what are we going to do with it? Yeah, let's send it back to them, which I find interesting because I could imagine what they're thinking. They've finally decided, by the way, I would like to think that what they would say is, hey, maybe we ought to listen to this God, right? That would be a logical thing to do here, but no, that's not what it is. So we're going to send it back. So one or two things happens here. Actually, maybe both things happen. We get rid of the plague, right, by sending it back, but maybe, just maybe, we send the plague onto them, right? Yeah. So we can't handle this God. We'll send him back, but they're not sending him back for him to attack them again. So maybe this is what's going to. So anybody read ahead to know what happens next? Does he go back? That's a trick question. He goes back a little ways. He goes back a little ways, and the ark goes back a little ways, and it's going to stay away from where it's supposed to be for a very long time. It's not going to be until you get to David that you finally get the ark back where it was supposed to be. You're talking about a long period of time that Israel went without what they were supposed to have, where the priest is supposed to go in and intercede for them and meet with God every year, where they're supposed to be bringing their sacrifices. There are consequences to our actions. I think he had to have taught it because Samuel got it, but he didn't teach it to the others, or at least insist that they understand it and follow it. Yeah. I think he was undoubtedly, based on the text, Eli was involved in the training of Samuel. Yes, so Samuel had to get that from somewhere. Okay, let's close with a prayer. Father, we're so thankful for the opportunity to be here this morning to study your word and to worship you. We're thankful, Father, that we have these accounts to help us to learn how to walk in faith and learn the consequences of our actions when we do not. And we pray, Father, that we will never make your blessings in our lives our gods, that they will never become our idols, that we will always recognize that it is you who is the great giver of these blessings, and that they are to be used to glorify you. Help us, Father, never to trust in ourselves, but always in you. In Christ's name, amen.